This one thing is what creates an incredible amount of cognitive dissonance in many of our lives. This one way of being that we don't even realize we're doing, or that we don't even realize that it is in the back of our mind, is what holds so many back from a life of our choosing, a life of fulfillment and passion. You see, this is something that has held many of us back in so many ways, especially myself. Throughout my entire teenage years, it seems, teenage, childhood, up until the past 2 or 3 years probably, this is something that held me back from almost anything great in my life, held me back from true enjoyment of the things I did have in my life. This is what prevented me from making the changes necessary to live more accommodating situations, even in seemingly insignificant situations from when I was younger. What I'm talking about here is the idea that we believe what we know. Each of us operates from the perception that we have gained through life. It's not a linear function by any means, meaning it is not straight up. It's like a windy road that goes around 6 different curves, like 6 different angles. So we have all developed our own sense of self in the world and our own sense of the world itself. We have our own knowledge on how the world works, so to say. Some of us are more based in practical knowledge. Some of us are more based in school knowledge, for lack of better words. Some of us are more based in spirituality. The point is that we all have our different frame of perception in the world that we have developed through many different situations and environments and our reactions to them. But if you ask me, and I've talked about this at a time before, the devil is closed-mindedness. And if we're looking at what I'm talking about here today, the idea that what we believe, what we know, if we allow this internal sense, this knowing and believing that of which we know to be the absolute truth because of our experiences, if we allow that to overcome our true sense of self, overcome the understanding of others, if we allow it to prevent us from seeing others in the light that we're one and the same, and we all have something to gain from one another, we are allowing the devil or a negative presence or a anti-life entity into our realm of consciousness. If we allow this hate and this absence of love to foster any sense of self within us, we are very quick to shut down many different gateways and bridges to a life of abundance, to a life of pleasure and fulfillment. Not pleasure, purpose, or purposeful pleasure. And ultimately, the life of our choosing. You see, because we're all dreamers deep down. We all have an inner vision for the world, an inner vision of ourself for the world. A deeper sense of self that we truly want to express. But as we go through life, we forget about that. It gets covered up by the dirt of energy unexpressed. We go through different environments that hurt us and harm us and prevent us from really seeing ourselves in the true light in those moments. And we react, and our ego develops, and our higher sense of self diminishes. But it's always there. It's always there. It always seeks expression in some way, shape, or form. You see, but we believe what we know. So all this shit that we go through, all these different situations that are so painful, they create a resistance to change within us. We begin to believe that we are just that. Whatever that situation made of us, that's us. That's us. This is just how life treats me. That this is always my situation. And it has been so many times before, so it's going to continue it, right? And I believe that because I know it to be true of myself. I know it to be true in the world. Constantly sending that signal back out into the universe saying to give me that situation over and over and over again. You see, creation is finished. Anything you want is possible. Anything you want is already there at some point or another. Most of the time, for experiential sake, we react emotionally. And we continue to remain in the space of an emotional reaction for a long period of time. That of which tears us down internally and prevents us from seeing the true light of life. The true light of ourself in life. So once again, it is our ability to see past what we believe and know. To look outside of our own box. And see others for what they truly are. To understand we are all a part of the same consciousness. That we can all tap into the infinite consciousness. Infinite intelligence. And bring it into fruition. Bring it into our life in a more fulfilling sense. You see, but most of us don't do that. Especially, I know I did for a long time. I believed what I knew. I took a look at my life. I took a look at every event I had been in. I reacted to every event I had been in a way that caused me to be overly emotional day after day. When stress came, it was emotion that met it. It was emotion that fought back and prevented me from living to my highest potential, to making the most out of any given event. You see, it was my lower self, my sense of ego, the parts of me that were protecting myself in reaction to my emotional reaction, fight or flight, over some situation that was hardly calling for fight or flight. Because I believed that I knew that I was just this guy, just this kid who couldn't handle it, who was scared of this, who was scared of that. It wasn't until I began to shift that belief, when I began to look outside of what I knew, what I believed to be true, that I understood and realized that there was more to life than that. That it wasn't about what I had been through, that it was about what I could have, that it was about what it could be. Seeing what others had, seeing the possible realities that were out there, the power and passion I could feel from gaining a different sense of self and being a different individual. Realizing that many of the people that I started to look up to, the different motivational speakers, the different artists, the different actors, this, that, and the third, that had done more with their life. It was then that I realized that many of them were basic or, normal, so to say, when they first started, when they were born, when they were a kid, when they were younger. But they developed a different sense of self. They developed a skill. And they continued down the road no matter what happened to them, to have that different sense of self, to have that expression on the world. And as I realized that I could too. Over time. Over a long-term process of internalizing just that. Building against the opposite that I had learned, as most of us do, as I was younger. Beating down the idea that I was always just going to be what I had always been. Beating down the idea that my anxiety was constant and that I just had anxiety. My mom has anxiety. Well, I'm just going to be anxious the rest of my life. This is just the way it always has been. That was my emotional state. My emotional state was, well, this is familiar. It's normal for me to be anxious. It's been like this my entire life. But my decision to question it, my decision to abolish the idea of labels and actually foster a sense of extreme dislike for a sense of labels from a young age, I'll say, that allowed me to separate myself from these labels, from these possible labels, I should say, and choose a different sense of self, choose a different identity that I wanted to chase after and become. You see, I had to break the curse of believing what I knew to be true in that sense. And I had to shift my beliefs to something I didn't know. I had to shift my beliefs into a different frame of concept of myself to begin to learn and know something different. So do yourself a favor and reflect on where it is that you are and where you want to go. You don't have to have a direct answer at all. Any direction other than downhill towards where you don't want to go, or aimless at least, anything is better than that. Question what you believe you know. Question what it is that is so certain to you. And make sure it's founded on the right beliefs that you want for your life. You'll have an amazing day.